Welcome to the Juniper podcast, where we talk about the sometimes messy, emotional, and more nuanced aspects of being a dog parent. I'm your host, Allison, the founder of Juniper. You can find us at juniperpet.co to read more, download our free guides, and find the best emerging pet products. My co-host is Haley.Loving, dog mom of Scout and writer for Juniper, and her own website, Pause and Reflect. You can find that at pause, P-A-W-S, and reflect.blog. Let's get into it. Welcome, everybody, to the Juniper podcast. I'm Allison. I'm here with Haley. We are two dog moms. Actually, we both have two cattle dog mixes. So we're very busy with our high energy and sensitive dogs with lots of stuff to talk about. Today, we want to talk about the topic of having a dog that dream versus reality, sort of like all the things we thought it would be like and what it actually is like. So Haley, thank you for joining me today and talking about this. I know we've nerded out about this topic before.
Oh yeah, this is one of my big passions, how things can look so different than we imagine.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Okay. So if we had a top three, what did you think it would be versus what is it really like? Like, what is one of those for you?
I think the biggest for me has been this idea that when I first adopted Scout, I thought that if I just worked hard enough and trained her well enough, like if I was willing to put in the effort and read all of the training resources and work with professional trainers, take online courses, I thought that there were just these concrete steps I could follow and then I could make her into anything. And that's a really nice, rosy idea. And it's not completely not true, right? We have great power to shape who our dogs are, the same way that we have great power to shape who we are. And that effort can be incredible, can have huge impacts. But I can't fundamentally change who my dog is. She's not a robot that I'm programming. And so there are some things that are just personality traits, or she has preferences the same way that I have preferences and my husband has preferences. And we're all individual creatures interacting with each other. And I didn't fully realize that. I'm not sure. I just was a little bit wrapped up in ego and just this idea that if I put in the effort previously in my life, there've been a lot of situations where I just worked hard enough and then it all panned out perfectly. So yeah, I thought that I could totally remove her fear. She's a pretty fearful dog by default. And I thought that if I just trained hard enough, she would never be afraid of anything ever again. And I thought that I could, just make her a fundamentally different creature. And that's not really how it works.
Yeah, I think so too. That, I know that for me, I had a similar one, which was that I thought that, I was living in New York for many, many years and saw dogs everywhere. And there's really a specific, I think something for especially dogs who live in urban settings where they're either the type of dog that can live in that setting or they've done a bunch of training to become the type of dog that can live in that setting. And so I kind of thought well, all dogs are New York City dogs. They can all sit at brunch. They can all go to parks and meet new dogs, and everything that happens on a leash is fine. They can all go to dog parks, and dog parks are this totally normal thing that's there's no issue with it all. And then when I got my dog, I started learning, oh, okay, all of these things are right for some dogs and not right for other dogs. I didn't realize how much nuance there was going to be. And I just think I look back now and I'm it was so naive that I thought that every dog that I saw doing anything, my dog could do all of those things instead of really, like you're saying, figuring out that your dog is an individual and then kind of adjusting your life for what they can and can't do. And then also deciding what you want to keep working on, right? I never want to say that we're done training and this is what she can do and everything else is something she can't do. I will never do that. We'll never stop training and trying things. And I do think you can unlock new levels of your dog, which is one of the most fun parts of having a dog. But I was so naive. I was oh, dogs, they're cool. They hang out, they sit. I understood naively that there were some dogs that had challenges, but I thought they were the extreme cases where it's just no, most dogs you're going to have to do some level of training and you're going to have to adjust your expectations.
Yeah, I was the same way. And I felt the extreme examples that I had seen, I'd only encountered a few of them, where a dog was having more challenges just navigating day-to-day society. That was really where I felt the effort came in. I just had this still rosy vision that even if my dog started off really difficult or we were really struggling, I just thought that if I trained hard enough, I could completely change her. And I have changed her in so many ways, and she's changed me in so many ways, but like we are still fundamentally who we are. We have our predispositions, we have our preferences. And then I think that's probably the ongoing biggest balance of my journey with her is figuring out like what is something that we can continue either compromising on or pushing towards? Like, how can we keep growing? I never want to stop growing with her. But then what things are uphill battles where, you know, either she really hates it or it's just not important enough to me to prioritize it. And so it turns into this whole goal setting, prioritization, mental framework that I didn't realize I'd be thinking about so deeply. I kind of just thought I'd have this like arbitrary list of like, here's what I'm going to train my dog to do. We're going to do these things. It's going to be awesome. People on the street are going to look at us and say like, wow, that girl trained her dog really well. It's going to feel amazing. And that's not how it played out.
Oh my gosh, that is the whole like view of what you think it's going to look like is so funny to me because I think that was really humbling to me too. I was like, I remember when my dog was a puppy going to the puppy training classes and fully like delusionally thinking, well, we're going to be the best ones there. And then going, and actually, my dog was at the start actually the worst puppy in puppy class, like unable to sit, listen, do anything. All she wanted to do was play with every other puppy that was there. And all the other puppies wanted to sit and just like kind of, they were a little scared, but she was very outgoing. Now I realize that that was her being, you know, that was good in a sense. It was like a sign that she's going to be this like extroverted, outgoing, very friendly dog. But at the time I was like, she's not sitting, she's not staying. It's like, she's like 12 weeks, 13 weeks old. Like, what did I expect, you know?
Oh, yeah. Yes, the training class experiences. We kind of had the reverse where like Scout is a much more reserved dog and she's very handler focused, but she's so environmentally sensitive, or she used to be much more. That is one thing that we've been able to improve a lot. And now living full time in a van on the road has helped because she's constantly exposed to new environments and she's pretty stable in that regard now. But, you know, like 4 years ago, when I would take her to a group training class, like she'd be afraid of the hallway that we had to walk through to get to the training arena. And so once we were there, like the work that we've been putting in behind the scenes showed and she could perform certain things, but her mental state was just so unproductive in that environment. And yeah, it took me way longer than I wish it had to separate out like, here are the concrete skills that I've trained that you're able to do. Like you can hold a stay through all of these distractions, or, you know, you can go into middle position. Like this is fun. But then, you know, separating that from the mental and emotional state that she was in and some of those more personality things. Like just because you can perform this doesn't mean that you're feeling good about performing it, doesn't mean that you're confident in this space. Like you're still this sort of at a baseline, timid, sensitive creature. And yeah, for some reason, I really thought I could just erase that. I was like, I'll build her confidence by having her jump on unstable objects and she'll like learn that she can conquer the world and like, then it'll be great. You know, like 1 month of that.
And that's
it'll
it.
be great.
That's all you need to do. Yeah, I know. I followed these like dog accounts at these amazing trainers training their dog. And just in my delusional mind was like, we'll be there in what? 2 weeks? You know, like just have no idea like how much goes into that, how much is, you know, based on the type of dog and the owner and the trainer. And like, what does it take to be, you know, a person who has like such a greatly trained dog that they are on Instagram with a ton of followers? Like, obviously they're in the top percentage of this, right? Like, why am I comparing it to what I'm doing at home with my dog? So I think there's a lot there. So part of the reason we wanted to do this episode is because, you know, so many dogs are returned either to shelters or to breeders because people didn't really know what they were getting into. And so I hope this episode can serve as something useful for people, either if they're considering getting a dog for the first time or if they're thinking about adding a dog to their family. You know, like what are the other things that we would want to tell them about? So we'll take a quick break here and then we'll come back and we'll dive into some more of those things. Ever wonder what you should be feeding your dog? I always say the best dog food is the one your dog will eat, that you can afford, and that your vet approves of. That's why we love Optimal here at Juniper. Their food meets European quality standards and is full of prebiotics, omegas, and superfoods that your dog will love. To save 20% with your Juniper discount, visit the link in our show notes. Okay, welcome back. Today we're talking about things we wish we knew about getting our dogs before, sort of like the dream versus reality of what it's really like to have a dog. And so, yeah, I would say one of the things for me that was really surprising, I got my dog when she was a puppy. I think this will be important for anybody who's considering getting a puppy, especially since they're cute. A lot of people want a young dog because they'll like ideally have them longer. Like this is, obviously people love puppies, right? Like, but I think like I was completely unprepared for a puppy who's as high energy and like who needed as much training as my dog did, especially in the early days. And so like something that surprised me, I think talking about dream versus reality is like the reality of the puppy blues, which was not a term I had ever even heard before I got my dog and started hanging out in like online communities and reading about dog training and like literally reading about it for hours every day. And finding out that there were other people who were literally like, temporarily depressed while their dogs were puppies. And so for so many reasons, and like, I think like teaching people that puppy blues is a real thing is really important. It's something like I want people to learn through reading and listening to us and reading on Juniper and things like that, is that like it usually passes, like unless you've got a dog that's really the wrong fit. So something that was really surprising to me about puppy blues was like, obviously your whole life changes. Like if you're potty training, you can't go out because every 2 hours you're taking them out to teach them how to do it, including all night. Like, I don't think people know that, like my husband slept on the couch for like a month. So he would do the night shift and then I was doing the whole day shift. It was like, this is just a puppy. Like we did not realize like how hard that would be and how much work that was. And so I think like it was also hard puppy blues wise because it was so like thankless in the beginning, like she did not cuddle until she was like 6 or 7 months old or something. And even then it was like, she was just a ball of energy literally bouncing off the walls all day. And so I was like slaving away for her. And then she would just like ignore me at night. And I was just like, when am I going to cuddle? When is this going to be like, now obviously everybody gets different dogs. I have a cattle dog mix, extremely high energy. She's got a bunch of different breeds in her that are all high energy. So maybe you will get a chill dog that's more like a cuddly little puppy, but just like no one's out there warning you that these things might take a year or 2 years until your relationship has developed. And so puppy blues for me was one of the big dream versus reality moments.
Yeah, the puppy blues are such a real thing. I have a close friend who's really amazing with dogs, and she's foster dogs and has a dog of her own. And she'll be the first person to tell you that she hates puppies. And of course, she doesn't mean it in some like awful way. Like she raised her dog from a puppy and she loves puppies. But also, she's very aware of the fact that they're really, really challenging, and she doesn't have interest in raising another puppy if she can avoid it. And I think that that's totally fair. I'm on team like really love puppies, but also my experiences with them were all when we had fosters, and so I knew that it was temporary because puppies go quickly. And so I think we only had, the longest was maybe like a month that we had this really sick puppy, and then we got his brother and we had him until they got adopted, and it was really challenging. But I think because I had that end date, I was able to prevent myself from fully experiencing the puppy blues. And I think that sometimes the puppy blues come from that understanding that you've committed to this creature, and sometimes a sense of like feeling a little trapped almost, or worried that you made this decision feels irreversible and shaking up your whole life. And even with the fosters, like knowing that it would end, like that made it so much easier for me. But even then, we were exhausted. Like we were so tired. My husband and I kept talking about how like fostering baby dogs would have just wrecked our relationship if it wasn't strong going in. Like the fraying that it can put on the human end of things is just so much to think about. Yeah. So even fostering these baby dogs and knowing that it was temporary, I could still really understand where the puppy blues would come from because we were exhausted. And my husband and I just kept talking about how if our relationship had not been stable and steady going in, that experience just could have caused so much strife. And I think sometimes that gets overlooked in like the cuteness of puppies. And one of our foster puppies came to us really, really sick. And that was so challenging. I was literally messaging the foster coordinator at the shelter the one night saying, like, is he going to die? Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do here. what's happening. And that for me is one of the other big things that I wasn't prepared for getting a dog with Scout, actually, is that she's not the healthiest dog. We adopted her as an adult. And I kind of thought that because she was an adult when we adopted her, that any like chronic conditions would have already been discovered. I didn't really have like any scientific basis for that thought. I just sort of assumed, right? Like if she was going to have a chronic condition, it would have been diagnosed by the time that she came into the shelter and, they had her for a couple months there. She passed all of the vet checks there. Or I thought that like dogs get sick as they get older, like the same way that people do. And so I would have been prepared for that. But then I had this dog who was like maybe 3-ish years old who started having seizures. And I just, I had adopted a healthy dog, so I thought. And no one misled me. Like, she did appear healthy at the time. And it was just so unexpected and so difficult to deal with. Like, the emotional struggles of watching her suffer and not being able to explain things to her, not knowing what was going on financially, like running those tests, figuring out how many diagnostics do we go through. She gets stressed out at the vet's office. And some of the procedures are invasive. So you're weighing the cost and the benefit of like, we want to figure out what's going on with you because maybe we can address it. But what are the chances that there's, an acute neurological cause versus that it's just idiopathic? And like, how many of our resources, financial and training and time and all of this do we allocate to trying to get a diagnosis? And just all of these things that like, because she was healthy initially, didn't expect, and it was so challenging. And
this isn't a senior dog. Like, you didn't adopt a senior dog, like kind of knowing like, okay, you know what, I'm going to adopt a senior dog. It's going to be a health, we're going to have health issues probably in the next couple of years. And that's part of what I'm taking on. Because like people who do that and adopt senior dogs, that's so awesome and amazing. Like, it's like such a gift, but it is taking on, whatever health issues they're going to need. So you had a young dog. And I think that that's something that people wouldn't even think about, the dream versus reality. It's like, oh, well, you got a dog that was on the younger side, so you'll be fine for a bunch of years. It's like, no, you have to sign on the dotted line for everything when you take a dog into your life, which I think is something like a lot of people don't realize.
And it's so hard to estimate. I mean, we have better health testing now, but it's not like genetics are just a simple recipe. Everything is interconnected. We can select for certain traits. We can test for certain things. Sometimes there are unintended side effects of selecting for specific things. And like, that's such a complex conversation and things can be missed. And, sometimes you just get this young dog who has idiopathic epilepsy. We have no idea why she has seizures. We've troubleshooted so many different things. Even just in the last week, she had 2 seizures within 5 days of each other. And it was awful. And it's just part of our life together that we've adjusted to. And it doesn't feel like a horribly big deal now. We have a really great vet team. And, we've been so fortunate to have the resources to address it in ways that mean that everyone's quality of life is still high. But it's just something that I really hadn't considered, like I didn't think that I would be the one to adopt the dog with chronic health conditions. And here we are.
And you were, obviously the perfect one to get this dog, like the absolute perfect, parents for this dog to take care of her, like, especially with this, problem, because there are people who would return a dog at the sign of a problem. And like some of that, you can understand if it's a financial thing, but a lot of people would do it because they don't want to be bothered, and so like you've, got this dog so attached, so like, invested in her and her growth, and then also now having to take care of her and never having expected that. Like, it's something people need to think about and consider. It's like not a reason not to, try and go down. Like, we're not trying to say don't get dogs. We're running a community for people who love dogs. We're just kind of trying to say, like, think through all of these things. Which ones are you ready for? And which things might surprise you? I know for me, like something I learned later was, learning about, like, we did a DNA test for Addie after we got her. When we went to go get her, my husband and I were literally just like, well, we're going to rescue a dog. So now we're just following all the rescues Instagrams, and it's just really a matter of time till we like see a dog that we think, is kind of what we're looking for, which was really just medium size and like wants to run around and do outdoorsy stuff with like very loosely, like that would be cool. We'll go on long walks or whatever. And we got this cattle dog mix. She's a mix of lab, husky, pit bull, and cattle dog. And they're all pretty, other than like the pitties, like pretty high energy. The huskies and labs are like super extroverted, outgoing, you know, and obviously we say this stuff with the understanding that every dog is different and breed is not everything. But I didn't even know about breeds. I really didn't know like the differences between them or what they're kind of known for. And so we ended up with this cattle dog that like needs to run a couple miles every day, like can play 2 hours of soccer and still wants a walk after that, you know? And so to some degree, it's like, is this just a puppy? Is this whatever? But now she's almost 2 years old and it's like, no, her energy is high. And so my life has just grown to match that energy, which has actually been great. But, you know, I think it's something to think about. And it's not every breed and rescue and whatever, like the stuff you're never going to know everything about what this dog is before you get it if you rescue it, or even if you go to a breeder with a long line, you know, you might get a dog that's just different than its relatives, right? Like there's no way to guarantee what type of dog you're getting. So I think the takeaway and learning for me was really just like, but learn something about what you think they are. Like the rescue did say, we think these are blue heeler / Australian cattle dog mixes. So we like kind of knew that. But we didn't really know what that meant. And so we just were like, we were signing on the dotted line. We were down for anything and it worked. But you would really need to want a dog that's extremely high energy for, you know, my dog to work for you. It's a very, like, you'd have to be at a specific point in your life. You'd have to have their specific, like, wants and needs for what you want out of a dog. You know, she's not like a couch lap dog situation. So I think there's something to like learning about breeds, or even if you're looking at rescues, what are they mixed with? Like, can you pick up anything of what they are? That gives you like a hint for what you might be getting into, but then you also need to be ready for them to be nothing like that breed and, you know, have anything to do with that. So I think that this is like, you know, this is a topic that's important for that reason, but it's also like, it's not everything, but it's also not nothing, right?
Definitely. This is the exact reason that my personal favorite advice, if someone comes to me and they want a dog and they have like really specific lifestyle considerations, because that's valid, right? Like some of us are more flexible and some of us have a specific set of circumstances and we really need a companion who can fit those circumstances. And there are deal breakers for good reason. Like, you know, my sister, my niece is like 1.5 now. And if she and her husband were looking to get a dog, their life is pretty chaotic and they're renovating a house. And my niece is just running around and like they would definitely need a dog who was good with children. Like that is a deal breaker for them. They would do their best to advocate and make sure that everything was fair and that the dog and the kid were both respected. But, you know, fundamentally, they would need a dog who enjoyed or was neutral to being around kids, right? And so my best advice, if somebody really does have these considerations that are more exact, like you and I kind of went in a little bit more blind and we were lucky to be in the flexible positions where that worked out for us. I always love to say foster to adopt, because then you can get to know the individual dog, you know, not just at the breed level or appearances, or even like behavior can look so different in the shelter sometimes. Like you can actually hang out with this individual dog, come to know them as the individual that they are, see how they are in your home environment. And, you know, if it's not a fit, you've still done a great thing by getting them out of the shelter until they find their adoptive family.
Foster to adopt is great. Because it helps you test you. Like you might think, am I ready for a high energy dog? Am I ready for, you know, a dog that's going to just be a love bug on like, what do I really even want? Like you might say or think you want something in a dog. And then the reality of like how your life is, it really might be different. And I think like, it's also so important to like not judge those first 3 days. What do they say? It's like, I think in the rescue, it's something like 3 days, 3 weeks, and 3 months until you like see the dog for what they are. You know, the first 3 days, they're like totally just decompressing from the shelter. The foster that we had was like almost not even like looking at us or paying attention for a couple of days. Like we were like, is she okay? And then even just a few days later, she was like listening, sitting, doing stuff for treats. And it was like, oh, she was just overwhelmed in the shelter. And that is such like a reason to get. And now you're making me want to foster again and even more. Like every time I talk about fostering, I just want to foster all the dogs, you know? But again, then that you need to figure out, okay, what's the dream versus reality for foster? You know, everybody dreams of having like a dog rescue or whatever, you know, what is the reality for what that is like and what can you do? And so then it's like just figuring out what we can do. But like, yeah, I think the dream versus reality for dogs, it's like so under talked about. Like it's like a conversation that just people ignore. I think that there's like so much like we could probably do like 2 episodes on this, right? But like what are the other things that you learned after getting a dog, and what's the reality or something that, you learned after getting your dog?
Yeah. I think that another big one for me is that I've always loved animals and dogs, especially. I mean, I was the little kid who just like every time there was a family gathering or I just saw a dog on the street, like my parents had taught me to ask before petting, but it was always a perfunctory ask. And I was just like so excited to see the dog, wanted to be best friends with every dog. And I didn't understand. I had no empathy for the fact that not everybody is comfortable around dogs, and for very good reason. And I feel like there are so many phrases that get tossed around like half jokingly in the dog loving world, and they don't come with ill intent, but I think they can create these ripple effects of harm where like you'll hear someone say, if you don't like dogs, then I don't like you. Or like, if you don't like dogs, you're a psychopath. Like I've seen that just like on a, text post on Instagram. And I get the sentiment, right? And it's like jokey. And like, of course we love our dogs. Like I'm such a huge dog lover. It is hard for me to connect with someone who like deeply doesn't like dogs. That's a big disconnect for us. But at the same time, I've come to understand how many valid reasons there are and that we all have different experiences. Like my past experiences with dogs were almost entirely positive. And, I was bitten once as a kid, but even then could understand, like it was explained to me well what had happened and I didn't harbor any long-term fear. It was a really mild bite. So like, I just hadn't had these experiences where I would develop some sort of fear or discomfort. Or even, sometimes people just don't have experiences. Like my husband, Sean, he'd almost never interacted with dogs until he started dating me. His mom's pretty afraid of them and he just like wasn't around them. And so he kind of didn't know what to think. Anyway, this played out into having Scout, where she's not a huge dog, but she's like a pointy-eared dog. And there are actually some interesting studies that suggest that pointy-eared dogs are more intimidating to people who are afraid of dogs than floppy-eared dogs.
Oh, then my dog is very scary because she's all the big ears straight up to the sky.
Right? Yeah. And so anyway, I was slowly coming to this realization, like having had conversations with my mother-in-law and a couple of friends who I was getting closer to who did not have my same set of experiences with dogs. And then there were a few times where I was out with Scout and I saw it firsthand, and it just all really clicked for me. Like I used to take her to this outdoor yoga class when we lived in Florida that she was allowed to come to. She could just like chill on her own mat next to me. And you had to sign in at the beginning of every class, right? And most of the people there knew her and like she had said hi to them and they liked her. And, she's very gentle and reserved with new people. So I'm just like standing in line to fill out the little sign in form. And I'm not really paying much attention to her. She's just at the end of her leash, kind of like sniffing around. And she sniffed up towards a woman and, like just sniffed, like didn't even fully approach her or anything. And the woman actually jumped and made a noise. That's how afraid she was. And I just felt awful because it had not crossed my mind.
Right. You're like, this is my beautiful, amazing, perfect dog. How could you react this way? Yeah.
Yeah. And even when she was being like she was being well behaved, she wasn't barking or pulling or any of those things. And so I sort of had this idea in my head that like, if my dog was well trained and acting polite, then there's no way she could ever do psychological harm to anybody. And it becomes a messy conversation because like I can't live my life in fear of ever making anyone else uncomfortable, right? Like we still deserve to go out and enjoy the public areas, but it's just been something else for me to think about. And I have a lot more empathy for why some people might be uncomfortable. And then like just little steps that I can take, right? Like, if we're passing someone on a sidewalk and I see them starting to make space, it's kind of like how the longer we have our dogs, the more in tune we get to their body language. I feel like I'm like that with people, like strangers that we see now too, where it's a lot easier for me to see if someone is shying away a little. And then I can like put Scout on my opposite side or like step off the path and ask her to sit. And I've been floored at how many times people have thanked me for doing those things and like admitted that they weren't comfortable and that helped. And yeah, I just can't believe how many years I went through just like letting my childhood dogs at the end of their leash just like go up to everybody and getting offended if someone didn't like it. Like I was such an inconsiderate dog handler in the public. And I didn't mean bad, but now I know so much more.
But you love your dog, and it's like, why can't everybody else? And we're all like to some degree living in our own worlds. And I think that that's growth, right? Like, because early on for Addie, it was like very stressful. I was trying to teach her how to walk. She's this like little thing. I know that she would never, hurt a fly type of thing. You know your dog, but this other person doesn't know anything. And so like that took me a while to learn too. That we had some things where people would be like, "Oh my God, a dog!" Just like we're just merely walking by. We're 10 feet away from you, and I'd be like, why are people so dramatic about that? But you know what? Like, I've kind of come to the same place you're at, which is like, it doesn't matter. They might have had a really bad experience with a dog. My job is to make everybody comfortable if I can, like protect my dog, keep her away from this person. Like my dog doesn't need to greet people. She doesn't need to say hi unless somebody seems like they're really a dog person, like we don't need to do that. And then her default should be in training, in my opinion, like no greetings. Like we practice no greetings, unless it's established between me and this person that we're going to like do a greeting like it, but it has to really be established, and part of that is people too, because I have like no worries. She could say hi to everybody, but not everybody's going to want to say hi, and that's okay, and it's just like, and so I think it's like anything else. It's like, you don't want to be that obnoxious person that's just like, well, like everybody should bend to me. It's just like, no, we're all working in the world together, and we have no idea what those people have been through, and like, yeah, and I totally agree with this whole sentiment of like, if you don't like dogs, then you get out of here, whatever, like those sayings too, because it's sort of like, even we're coming from like running a dog company here. Like we were writing about, thinking about, like we could not love them more, but like you also have to respect people and their preferences and be a good, I think that's part of being a good dog owner, it's like being like, obviously looking out for them, but also looking out for people and not having an out of control dog. I think that is like what that contributes to making people dislike dogs. It's like, oh, people let them run around. They're acting crazy. They're not handling them properly. They don't even care. It's like that contributes to dogs, and so it's just like, if we want to be like, good dog handlers, dog parents, whatever you want to call us, like that's part of it, I think, is really just respecting people and their space. And I default to like, my dog shouldn't say hi to you, go near you, or interact with you unless you're coming to me like, oh my gosh, a dog, like really making a big deal out of how much you want to say hi to her. And then even then, I'm going to think about if this is the right setting, if this is the right thing. Are there other stimulatory things going on, because my dog can get overstimulated. So it's just something to keep in mind. It's like, not everybody needs to love our dogs, and we don't need to get extreme. Like we know we love them. We don't have to go that extreme on it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's such a complex thing, right? Like different environments have different social norms, and like the behavior of a dog at a pet store that's like a designated spot for pets and their people, I think can reasonably be very different than if you're like at a fancier restaurant patio and your dog needs to be much quieter. And there are all sorts of there's all sorts of nuance in it. And that's another balance for me, is just figuring out, like, how can I, to the best of my ability, respect the people around me the same way that I want them to respect me and my dog, right? Like, I would like people to respect our personal space and communicate in a kind way and, not just like run up and grab us. And so I should give the same consideration to them. But at the same time, I could easily drive myself nuts overthinking this and feeling like I should never bring my dog anywhere because there's a chance that someone 30 years ago was bit by a dog. And even if Scout is 20 feet away, they might still be afraid. And like, yeah, just this like tightrope edge of being conscientious, but not driving ourselves crazy, doing the best we can, understanding that it's an imperfect world. But even just little efforts go such a long way.
Just being thoughtful, about this interaction, or like what it might mean for the other person, or, how you're controlling your dog in that scenario, is more than a lot of people do. It's like a lot of people just get dogs, let them run wild, never do anything. It's like, that's what we're trying to help, like create situations where you learn a little bit more and we can all get like a little bit better. So, okay, I want to go over like some of the takeaways from this episode that I hope people are having, which is, for me, one of them was, every time I see a dog doing something, especially when I lived in New York, not having the idea that my dog will necessarily be able to do every single thing to the level of every single dog. Dogs have their own strengths and weaknesses. Like your dog that you either have or are going to get someday is going to have come with its own strengths and weaknesses, and you have to accept them for what they are. And then the second one was puppy blues. Really just like puppy blues exists. It's real. It passes. If you really love your dog, like try to get through it. We don't want dogs return unless it's really not a fit for you. And that's okay if that's really not a fit for you, because that dog might end up with somebody that's a better fit for them. But like, don't go in not knowing that puppy blues are a thing. Like we're telling you here, we're warning you, like research it. And then the other one is that, anything you can learn about like breed, size, or energy level about the dog you might be getting. It's not perfect. It doesn't dictate exactly how your life is going to be with this dog. There's still going to be things that surprise you, but learn a little bit about what you can, whatever you can glean, just to help set you both up for success. So those were kind of like my takeaways. I know, Haley, do you have yours?
Yeah, you can do a lot with training, and absolutely you should focus on trying to grow with your dog as much as you can in ways that are relevant to your life. But don't expect that training can fundamentally make your dog not who they are. The same way that you have your own personality, they have their own personality, and you want to kind of work in harmony with that instead of, asking your dog to give up something core to their being. And the second one is that health stuff can come up even in young, otherwise healthy dogs. And it sucks when it does, but we can surround ourselves with strong support networks. There are a lot of resources available to get through it. And so that's just something to be aware of, that, that it's unpredictable. And you might think that you're getting this healthy dog who you're just going to like go on adventures with for years and years and years. And it might end up looking a little bit different. And, you can have to adjust. And then that final one, that, not everyone loves dogs. Not everyone is going to love your dog, and that's okay. That does not undermine how great your dog is. That does not undermine how much you love them, but it's just worthwhile to be conscious of that in public, and doing that can help pet-friendly spaces stay pet-friendly and help, give dogs and their handlers a better name. And that can have really great ripple effects for this, sort of future of dog parenthood that we'd love to see.
That's great. Thank you so much for doing this episode with me. Hopefully people will listen to this and either learn a little bit or think a little bit more. Or also, if you already have a dog and you're not in the market for one right now, hopefully this just made you feel seen about some of the things that might have been tougher than you thought. Because we definitely are like very vulnerable about this, thinking we were going to be perfect. And then, really learning what the reality was like. So hopefully that helps you feel seen as well. If you're already a dog parent, and if you're not and you're thinking about it, hopefully these are some things you can think about and really like know what you're getting into a little bit before you get your dog. We still want you to get dogs, as many of them as possible, and then join Juniper and come talk to us in the community and come read all of our articles and free guides. And we will see you in there. That's all for today. To learn more about your dog and discover the best handpicked pet products, visit Juniper at www.juniperpet.co.